completely hopeless at it. I was a really bad actor at school, and I've never been able to master the art of mimicry. But
the palace has broken its silence, and the confirmation changes everything we thought we knew about the royal family. Camilla's actions behind closed doors have been exposed, and Prince William's trust has been shattered beyond repair. The statement, released through official channels at precisely 3:47 this afternoon, a time carefully chosen to minimize immediate media chaos, while ensuring maximum evening news coverage, acknowledged what insiders had been whispering for months. Queen Consort Camilla had acted against Prince William's interests in matters critical to the monarchy's future. The wording, meticulously crafted by legal and communications teams, avoided inflammatory language, while confirming the substance of allegations that threatened to divide the royal family. Beneath this measured prose lay an explosive admission. Discussions meant to remain confidential among senior royals had been compromised, and information shared in good faith by the Prince of Wales during private family meetings had been used to undermine his initiatives for modernizing the monarchy. The confirmation followed sustained pressure from multiple quarters, as palace insiders, uneasy with ongoing deception, leaked details to journalists, and William's team, frustrated by months of obstruction, reportedly gave the king an ultimatum to publicly acknowledge the situation or face the resignation of key advisors loyal to the heir. While the statement stopped short of using the word betrayal, the implication was unmistakable. Trust, the most precious commodity within royal life, had been violated. Camilla had taken information provided by the future king not to support his vision, but to weaken it, striking at the heart of William's sense of family loyalty and institutional integrity. Despite their complicated history and the painful legacy of his mother's suffering, William had chosen reconciliation over resentment, cooperation over conflict, trust that has now been weaponized against him, and the palace confirmation leaves no room for denial. The emerging details from palace sources depict a calculated deception that began months ago and escalated until it could no longer be contained, evolving from disagreements over royal initiatives into a systematic effort to undermine the Prince of Wales. The betrayal struck at the heart of Prince William's authority and credibility within the institution he will one day lead, centering on discussions about the future structure of the monarchy. His plans for a streamlined institution, focused on core working royals and reduced expenditure, were meant to be confidential, developed over years of careful consultation with advisors and study of successful European models, and shared only in private family meetings at Balmoral. William believed he had at least tacit family support to develop his vision, but Camilla, according to multiple sources, saw his modernization agenda as a threat to the positions and influence of allies, and as a critique of the traditional approach she and King Charles favored. Rather than addressing his concerns openly, she reportedly worked behind the scenes to obstruct his initiatives. Confidential discussions were leaked to courtiers opposed to modernization. Media figures were given selective details to cast his proposals negatively, and private arguments were misrepresented to make his positions seem extreme. Perhaps most damaging was William's attempt to establish boundaries for the Duke of York, whose continued visibility he viewed as harmful to the monarchy's reputation. Camilla, maintaining closer ties to Andrew, allegedly undermined these efforts, reassuring him that William's position lacked family consensus and enabling his unexpected appearance at a family event in December, which palace insiders interpreted as a direct challenge to William's authority. The betrayal extended to finances, as William pushed for greater transparency in royal expenditures, while Camilla reportedly worked to delay and dilute his proposals, concerned that they might reveal uncomfortable details about her household. What made these actions especially egregious in William's eyes was their covert nature. Camilla outwardly appeared supportive during meetings, only to sabotage his initiatives afterward. Discovering that his stepmother had been working against him for months, using his own words against him, undermining his authority, and presenting a facade of family unity, struck at his deepest fears about both the institution and his role within it. Friends describe him as feeling profoundly betrayed, not just politically, but personally, as the deceit cut into his trust, his vision, and his sense of familial loyalty. Beyond the political ramifications, the betrayal cut deeply on a personal level. William had worked hard to build a functional relationship with Camilla despite their fraught history, publicly supporting her elevation to Queen Consort, including her in family events, and encouraging his children to develop relationships with their step-grandmother. All of that goodwill, however, has now been revealed as built on deception. The trust he extended was exploited, and the palace confirmation leaves no possibility of denial or pretense. The betrayal's scope went even further than initially apparent. Sources reveal that Camilla coordinated with certain household staff opposed to William's modernization efforts, obtaining details of his private discussions with his team. This breach of privacy has left William questioning whom he can trust within the palace, creating an atmosphere of suspicion that undermines effective operation. Those close to him describe a silent fury. He does not display theatrics, but instead becomes methodical, calm, and implacable, carefully reviewing every interaction and decision over the past 6 months to understand the full extent of Camilla's interference. Following the palace confirmation, William maintained his public composure, attending engagements and delivering remarks on charitable work, but behind closed doors he made his position clear to those who matter. In a private communication with King Charles, he respectfully but firmly conveyed that, while he would not engage in public conflict with his stepmother, he would not continue operating under the illusion that their relationship was unaffected by her actions. The king reportedly tried to frame the situation as misunderstanding or miscommunication, but William's response was decisive. The palace's confirmation disproved that interpretation, and he would not participate in any gaslighting regarding the betrayal. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, is said to share his outrage and views this revelation as confirmation of patterns she had already noticed in Camilla's attempts to influence royal initiatives. More importantly, she is concerned about the implications for their children, particularly Prince George, who as second in line will eventually face the same challenges and confrontations his father is now navigating. The betrayal has far-reaching implications for the future, particularly for Prince George, as it sets a precedent for how family members treat one another, and whether trust holds any meaning within the institution he will one day inherit. William's public composure sharply contrasts with his private actions. He has reportedly requested formal reviews of how information is shared within the family, who has access to confidential discussions, and what mechanisms exist to prevent future betrayals. Though framed as procedural improvements, these measures are widely seen as direct responses to Camilla's actions. He has also begun recalibrating relationships with other family members, assessing who can be trusted with sensitive information, and who has demonstrated loyalty to Camilla's agenda over institutional interests. This process has created anxiety throughout the extended family, as relatives recognize that their positions and futures may hinge on how they navigate this conflict. Some have attempted to advocate for unity, but William's response has been clear. Unity without accountability is permission for future betrayals. He is willing to collaborate with those who acknowledge the wrongdoing and commit to different behavior, but he will not pretend nothing happened to preserve comfortable fictions. His fury is driven not only by the immediate betrayals, serious as they are, but by their implications for his future reign. If family members feel entitled to undermine him while his father remains king, what might they attempt once he assumes the throne? How can he realize his vision of a streamlined, effective monarchy if senior royals feel free to sabotage initiatives? These questions weigh heavily on him in private, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about the institution he will inherit and the people with whom he must share power until that moment arrives. William has also sought counsel from constitutional experts and trusted advisors outside the traditional palace structure, recognizing that the informal systems long governing royal family relationships are inadequate to prevent or address betrayals of this magnitude, that he is exploring what formal mechanisms might be established to provide clearer lines of authority and accountability. Friends describe late-night conversations in which William expresses frustration that goes beyond Camilla's specific actions, encompassing broader patterns of institutional resistance to necessary change. He sees the betrayal as symptomatic of deeper problems, a palace culture that prioritizes internal politics over effective operation, protects the comfortable positions of insiders over the institution's long-term health, and mistakes tradition for wisdom and resistance for loyalty. The cold fury driving William's response reflects a determination that these patterns will not define his eventual reign. He is willing to accept conflict now, endure strained family relationships, and engage in uncomfortable conversations, if doing so establishes precedents and principles that will serve him better when he finally has full authority to implement his vision. Those who have watched William mature from traumatized child to beautiful prince to determined heir recognize this moment as potentially transformative. The betrayal has stripped away any remaining illusions about institutional benevolence or family loyalty. William now understands with a clarity that will shape all his future decisions that he must fight for every reform, trust cautiously, and prepare for opposition even from those who should be allies. This hard-won wisdom comes at a significant emotional cost. William did not want to view his stepmother as an adversary or approach family relationships as political calculations. He had hoped that everyone involved shared a commitment to the institution's welfare that would transcend personal ambitions and petty conflicts. The palace confirmation has exposed and deepened fractures within the royal family far beyond the immediate William-Camilla conflict. Decades of unresolved tensions, competing visions for the monarchy's future, and personal grievances have erupted into open warfare, threatening the institution's stability. King Charles finds himself in the most impossible position of his long-awaited reign. His marriage to Camilla represents his personal triumph, the culmination of decades of waiting and public rehabilitation. Yet his relationship with William represents his institutional legacy, the continuation of the Windsor line, and the monarchy's future. Being forced to choose between them, or even to navigate the impossible middle ground where both can be satisfied, has placed enormous strain on the king. Observers note that Charles appears increasingly haggard, and health concerns that briefly overshadowed his early reign have resurfaced amid the stress of managing this family crisis. Some palace insiders suggest that Charles's reluctance to fully confront Camilla's actions stems from awareness of his own historical role in creating dysfunction within the family. His affair with Camilla during his marriage to Diana set patterns of deception and hidden agendas that have infected the institution ever since. To fully hold Camilla accountable would require acknowledging his own contributions to the family's problems. Dysfunctional dynamics have splintered the extended family into competing camps, though the divisions are neither clear nor consistent. Princess Anne, known for her direct approach and institutional loyalty, has reportedly sided primarily with William, seeing Camilla's actions as violations of the protocols and trust that hold the family together. She has privately expressed concern that allowing such betrayals to go unaddressed could set dangerous precedents, potentially undermining the monarchy's functioning for generations. Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, have tried to maintain neutrality while quietly worrying about the conflict's damage to the monarchy's public standing. Their position is delicate, as they depend on the current king's favour while recognising that their long-term futures hinge on maintaining good relations with the future king. More distant family members face equally difficult calculations. The slimmed-down monarchy William envisions will include fewer working royals receiving public funding, and their positions depend partly on demonstrating loyalty and value to him. Being perceived as Camilla's allies could jeopardise their roles in William's eventual court. The impact on family events has been profound. Christmas at Sandringham, traditionally a chance for the extended family to gather and present a unified front, loomed as a potential disaster. The prospect of William and Camilla forced to interact while maintaining a facade of familial warmth created anxiety throughout the household, prompting complex behind-the-scenes negotiations over seating, schedules, and protocols designed to minimize awkward interactions while preserving appearances. These negotiations themselves became battlegrounds, with each detail carrying symbolic weight about who held power and whose comfort mattered most. William reportedly made clear that he would attend family events, but would not perform elaborate acts of reconciliation that had not genuinely occurred. He would be civil, appropriate, and correct, but would not embrace Camilla or pretend her betrayal had not affected their relationship. The children have not been entirely shielded from the tensions. Prince George, increasingly aware of family dynamics and his own future role, has asked questions about why certain family members seem uncomfortable with one another, and William and Catherine have tried to provide age-appropriate explanations while preserving their children's relationships with extended family. The situation has also revived painful memories and unresolved grief related to Diana. For William and Harry, despite their current estrangement, Camilla has always represented a complicated figure tied to their mother's suffering. William had tried to move past those associations to judge Camilla on her own merits, but the betrayal has made that impossible. He now sees echoes of the deception and manipulation that characterized his parents' failing marriage in Camilla's treatment of him, suggesting that the institution's dysfunction runs deeper than he had hoped. Some family members worry that this fracture could become permanent, creating rival courts within the broader royal household that persist for decades. They point to historical precedents where conflicts between monarchs and heirs caused institutional paralysis and public scandal, fearing that similar patterns in an era of social media and reduced public deference could be disastrous. Others argue that honest acknowledgement of conflict, however uncomfortable, is healthier than a pretense of unity, suggesting that confronting these issues openly could create opportunities for genuine resolution rather than temporary papering over irreconcilable differences. Meanwhile, the palace's communications and legal teams have gone into crisis mode. What had previously been handled as rumors and speculation suddenly became confirmed fact, requiring careful management to minimize damage to the institution's reputation and public standing. Facing palace officials was unprecedented in its complexity. They had to acknowledge the betrayal without allowing it to dominate the narrative about the royal family, satisfy public curiosity without revealing details that could worsen the situation, and maintain the fiction of family unity while admitting serious internal conflict. The statement released at 3:47 a.m. had gone through dozens of drafts, with every word weighed for its implications and potential interpretations. Legal advisors scrutinized it for anything that could be construed as defamatory. Communications experts analyzed how different media outlets might frame it, and senior royals had to approve language that acknowledged their own failures and conflicts. The final version was an uncomfortable compromise that satisfied no one completely, but avoided the worst possible outcomes. It confirmed that disagreements had occurred and confidential information had been mishandled, without assigning explicit blame or detailing specific instances of betrayal. The immediate media response was intense. Royal correspondents, who had spent months piecing together fragments of information, suddenly had confirmation of their reporting, allowing stories once cautiously framed as allegations to be reported as fact. Within hours, the palace press office was fielding hundreds of inquiries from media outlets worldwide. Social media exploded with commentary, speculation, and debate about what the confirmation meant for the monarchy's future. Palace officials attempted to contain the damage through coordinated responses, emphasizing the family's commitment to working through disagreements privately and maintaining focus on public service. But these efforts had limited success. The story was simply too compelling, the confirmed betrayal too dramatic to be overshadowed by bland reassurances about unity. Behind the scenes, even more frantic efforts focused on preventing further damaging revelations, as officials knew that the confirmation of the betrayal would encourage sources to share additional details and give journalists who had been sitting on unconfirmed stories reason to publish. Knowing the palace had already acknowledged the fundamental truth of internal conflict, senior advisors held emergency meetings to assess what other damaging information might emerge and how to prepare responses. They reviewed past communications and decisions, searching for vulnerabilities that could be exploited or misrepresented, and reached out to potential sources to secure commitments to discretion in exchange for future access or consideration. These efforts revealed the full extent of the crisis. Far too many people knew too much about Camilla's actions, with the circle of awareness extending beyond the immediate family to include dozens of staff members, advisors, and extended relatives, each a potential source of further damaging information. The palace also confronted strategic questions about the future. Should they continue minimizing the conflict or acknowledge its seriousness and present a plan for resolution? Should they provide more details to satisfy public curiosity or maintain maximum discretion to protect family privacy? Should they allow William and Camilla to present their own perspectives or insist on unified institutional messaging? Different factions within the bureaucracy advocated competing approaches. Supporters of William's modernization agenda saw an opportunity to advance reforms by leveraging public sympathy for the betrayed heir, while those committed to traditional operations viewed the crisis as threatening and favored maximum containment regardless of who was right or wrong in the underlying dispute. King Charles, ultimately responsible for deciding strategy, struggled to navigate these tensions, his instinct for discretion and privacy clashing with the recognition that the information was already public and could not simply be denied, while his loyalty to Camilla conflicted with his institutional obligations to protect his heir and the monarchy's future. The result was a muddled approach that combined elements of different strategies without fully committing to any. The palace confirmed enough to appear transparent, while withholding enough to frustrate public curiosity, acknowledged conflict while insisting it was being resolved, and admitted betrayal while minimizing its significance. This approach satisfied almost no one and created space for competing narratives to flourish. Media coverage fractured across ideological and generational lines, with conservative outlets downplaying the betrayal's significance, emphasizing family privacy and institutional stability, and portraying William's anger as potentially excessive, while progressive outlets were more sympathetic to William, presenting him as a modernizer blocked by traditionalists protecting their privileges and emphasizing accountability and the need for reform. Social media discourse was even more polarized, with passionate defenders of both William and Camilla creating echo chambers that reinforced existing beliefs rather than encouraging nuanced discussion. The palace found itself unable to control narratives in a fragmented media environment where anyone with a platform could offer commentary and conspiracy theories spread as quickly as verified facts. The crisis exposed weaknesses in traditional media management strategies. The cozy relationships between palace officials and established royal correspondents, which had allowed careful message control in previous generations, proved insufficient in an era dominated by social media influencers and independent commentators who could reach massive audiences without palace cooperation. Some younger palace staffers advocated for more aggressive engagement with digital platforms, arguing that the institution needed to meet audiences where they actually consumed information rather than relying on traditional media gatekeepers. Older officials resisted, seeing such engagement as beneath royal dignity and potentially dangerous in uncontrollable ways. This internal debate about communication strategy became intertwined with the broader conflict between modernizers and traditionalists, with each side interpreting the other's preferred approach as confirmation of their arguments about the monarchy's future direction. Meanwhile, practical challenges of daily operations continued. Staff needed guidance on handling inquiries, what information could be shared, and how to coordinate responses across different royal households. The lack of clear direction from senior leadership created confusion and inconsistency that undermined the institution's effectiveness. Some staffers, frustrated by the chaos and worried about their professional reputations, quietly explored opportunities outside the royal household, raising the prospect of losing experienced personnel and adding another layer of concern to an already overwhelming crisis. Financial implications also began to surface. Controversies and scandals historically correlated with reduced public support for royal funding, and at a time of economic challenges and constrained government budgets, the last thing the monarchy needed was ammunition for critics questioning taxpayer support. Palace officials began preparing briefing materials highlighting the royal family's economic contributions and the relatively modest cost of maintaining the institution compared to other government expenditures. Recognizing that arguments about the monarchy's economic contributions would be harder to make while the family appeared consumed by internal conflict and personal grievances, palace officials faced immense pressure. The confirmation of Camilla's betrayal has created a defining moment for the British monarchy, one that will shape the institution's trajectory for decades. The choices made now by family members and by the institution itself will determine whether this crisis becomes a turning point toward necessary reform or a wound that permanently weakens the monarchy's public standing and internal coherence. For William, the path forward requires balancing competing imperatives. He must protect his authority and credibility as future king while avoiding a complete rupture with his father and stepmother that would damage the institution he will inherit. Hold Camilla accountable for her betrayal while not appearing vindictive or petty, and advance his modernization agenda while respecting the constitutional reality that his father is currently sovereign. Those close to William suggest he is taking a long view, recognizing that his eventual reign may be decades away, and that immediate victories matter less than establishing precedents and principles that will serve him well throughout his rule. He is willing to accept temporary setbacks and uncomfortable compromises to advance long-term objectives. A patience tested by a lifetime of observing the institution struggle with dysfunction while preparing for responsibilities he cannot yet fully assume. For Camilla, the path forward is even more challenging. The palace confirmation has damaged her reputation in ways difficult to repair. Public sympathy, which had gradually increased during her years as queen consort, has evaporated among those who view betrayal of the popular heir as unforgivable. She must choose between doubling down on her current approach, accepting the consequences for her public standing, or attempting reconciliation with William, which would require acknowledging her actions and committing to different behavior. Neither option is appealing, and reconciliation may not even be possible given the depth of trust violated. Advisors are reportedly divided. Some encourage her to issue a personal statement acknowledging mistakes and committing to better collaboration with the Prince of Wales, while others warn such a statement would be perceived as weakness and embolden those seeking to diminish her role. The debate reflects broader uncertainty about her position and future. As Queen Consort, she holds significant ceremonial status, but limited formal authority, with her influence depending on her relationship with the king and the willingness of other family members to cooperate. The betrayal and its confirmation have damaged both sources of influence, leaving her more isolated than at any time since marrying Charles. For King Charles, the path forward requires accepting that his vision of a harmonious family uniting his wife and children has proven impossible. He must navigate the remainder of his reign, managing conflict between two people he loves, fully aware that his choices will be scrutinized and judged by history. Some advisors see the crisis as an opportunity for King Charles to clarify protocols, establish clear rules about information sharing, decision-making authority, and the prerogatives of the heir apparent, thereby creating structures that could prevent future betrayals and demonstrate leadership in addressing dysfunction. This approach would require confronting uncomfortable truths about his own role in creating the current situation, but it might also represent his best chance to leave a positive institutional legacy. Others argue that Charles should focus on damage control and gradual reconciliation, allowing time to heal wounds while avoiding dramatic interventions that could make things worse, noting that previous royal crises often resolve themselves through patience and discretion rather than direct confrontation. The tension between these approaches mirrors Charles's own conflicted feelings. Intellectually, he understands that accountability and reform are necessary, but emotionally he recoils from actions that would further damage Camilla or acknowledge the extent of family dysfunction. The path forward for the monarchy as an institution requires confronting fundamental questions about transparency, accountability, and adaptation to contemporary expectations. Public tolerance for bland assurances has eroded, replaced by demands for honesty and demonstration of value. This crisis could catalyze long overdue reforms, forcing conversations about streamlining, modernization, and accountability, or it could become another scandal in a series that gradually erodes public support until the institution's survival is genuinely threatened. The international context adds urgency. Other monarchies are observing Britain's handling of the crisis, drawing lessons for their own challenges, while Commonwealth realms reassess their relationships with the Crown. In Australia, long-debated Republican discussions have been renewed, with political leaders defending the monarchy under intense scrutiny and Republicans citing the crisis as evidence of the flaws in hereditary systems. Similar dynamics are playing out in Canada, Jamaica, and other Commonwealth nations, where public opinion on maintaining constitutional ties varies significantly across generations and communities. The next several months will be crucial. While the immediate crisis may fade from daily headlines, the underlying issues will persist. William and Camilla will be forced to interact at family events and official functions, and their choices will signal whether genuine reconciliation is possible or whether a prolonged Cold War will ensue, benefiting neither the individuals nor the institution. What seems certain is that the old ways of sweeping conflicts under the carpet and resolving disagreements through backroom maneuvering have become unsustainable, and the palace confirmation itself has fundamentally changed the stakes. The palace confirmation represents an acknowledgement that transparency, however uncomfortable, has become necessary, though the question remains whether it will lead to meaningful change or serve merely as a temporary concession to unavoidable circumstances. The monarchy has survived numerous challenges throughout its long history, adapting when necessary while maintaining continuity with traditions that provide legitimacy and public appeal. This crisis will test that adaptability again, revealing whether the institution retains the capacity for renewal or has become too rigid and dysfunctional to meet contemporary demands. For William personally, the path forward involves processing betrayal while remaining focused on long-term objectives. He must learn from the experience without becoming cynical or paranoid, protecting himself from future betrayals while remaining capable of forming the working relationships essential to effective leadership. Friends report that William is working with a therapist to process the emotional dimensions of the betrayal separately from the strategic considerations it raises, allowing him to acknowledge hurt and anger privately while maintaining a composed public persona. Catherine has been instrumental in helping him maintain perspective, reminding him of the values that drew him to public service, and encouraging him to focus on the positive impact their work can have rather than dwelling on obstacles. Together, they have been deliberately creating space for normalcy and joy amid the crisis, prioritizing time with their children and routines that provide stability and connection beyond palace walls. These practices reinforce that their identities and worth extend beyond royal roles and the conflicts those roles entail. Looking ahead, William recognizes that the betrayal and its aftermath will likely define a significant chapter of his life and prepare him for the reign that eventually comes. The lessons he is learning about institutional dysfunction, human nature, and the costs of leadership will shape how he wields power when he finally possesses it fully. Yet he cannot escape the existential question: will the monarchy survive long enough for his eventual reign to matter? If the institution cannot reform itself, address the dysfunction this crisis has exposed, and demonstrate value sufficient to justify continued public support, all his preparation and sacrifice may be rendered moot. This uncertainty weighs on every decision and interaction. William is not simply navigating a family conflict, he is fighting for the institution's survival, striving to ensure that when his time comes, there will still be a throne worth inheriting and a role worth fulfilling. The confirmation changes everything, forcing the royal family to confront betrayals that can no longer be hidden behind palace walls. And as William and Camilla navigate this unprecedented breach of trust, the monarchy's future hangs in the balance.